moving into the space of, so what do we do about the Canada Infrastructure Bank? First of all, a little uh, uh, note about why CUPE, the Canadian Union of Public Employees, has been interested in this topic, and along with Professor Whiteside and some others, have been studying this and making interventions on this since 2016, since before the bank was actually created by legislation in 2017. CUPE represents approximately 150,000 municipal workers across Canada. Municipalities own and operate approximately 60% of Canada's infrastructure. Those are the working conditions, the jobs and working conditions of our members. And so the ownership, operations, the funding for public infrastructure directly affects our members. And so we've been very interested in the creation and development of the Canada Infrastructure Bank since the beginning. And what we are here today to talk about is this report that we've been working on for a while that has some practical recommendations for the reform of the Canada Infrastructure Bank. We also participated in the committee hearing, the result of which was a recommendation to abolish the bank. And as Professor Whiteside mentioned, that doesn't seem to be in the Liberals' plans. So we've made some recommendations for reform of the bank, and we put the report back on the table. You'll notice that it lists Thomas Marois as the author. You may not know this, but CUPE, we actually keep Tom in a cell in the basement of the CUPE office, where he writes to make us look good in exchange for food and water, and it's a really great relationship. So Canada has a massive infrastructure deficit that with very little progress made on catching up. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities estimates it's approximately $150 billion. $50 billion of that alone to renew infrastructure that's in poor condition, and that's just for wastewater facilities that need either new or renewed infrastructure. And local governments over time have borne more and more of the cost of this infrastructure. And as climate change effects accelerate, the cost of infrastructure is actually increasing, and the gap is actually widening. The 2013 floods, for example, in Alberta and the City of Toronto cost $3 billion to address. The annual cost of natural catastrophes are forecast to rise to $5 billion annually, and perhaps $20 billion annually in 2050. So this is a serious issue. And I was just talking to Jessica last night about how the recent catastrophes, flooding disasters in BC have actually affected infrastructure funding in the province across the board, removing monies that had been previously earmarked for infrastructure projects, and making it even more difficult to address some of these gaps. So since 2016, we've been trying to engage with the Liberal government on the Canada Infrastructure Bank when it was just an idea for a public bank, and then after its creation, when we were very disappointed to see how the legislation was crafted to, as the other panelists have pointed out, to favor private finance over the public interest, and favor revenue-generating projects at the time estimated to be between 7 and 9% return on private finance investment, increasing the costs of projects. We issued a report in 2017 that called the Canada Infrastructure Bank and the Public's Right to Know, that addressed specifically the transparency and accountability issues that the legislation, the challenges in accessing information that the legislation caused. Corporate and business information that's deemed corporate or business proprietary information is shielded from public view. Business plans, meetings that the Canada Infrastructure Bank has with private investors, these are all redacted, shielded from public view. That's a serious problem for democracy and democratic governance. We've produced a number of cost analyses. We have made a number of submissions to government, including to the National Infrastructure Assessment, reinforcing what some other panelists have talked about with public-private partnerships and the nature of those projects, and how they transfer control and operations to the private sector. And we also participated in that committee report, or the committee hearings that resulted in the recommendation to abolish the bank. We've also engaged in a couple of campaigns, one of which I won't go into detail, but in Mapleton, Ontario, where the bank was attempting to privatize or create, encourage the municipality to create a water and wastewater P3. But there's a book back on the table called Public Water and COVID-19, I believe, David, where that campaign is described in one of the chapters. So CUPE's been doing a lot of work on this for a number of years, and working with our counterparts in labor, other civil society organizations, with the researchers who've been working on this as well. And we now are in a position to move into calls to action to pressure the Liberal government to actually engage in the legislated required 5-year review of the bank. And for that review, we hope to build a bit of a campaign and advance the recommendations that we have advanced in this report. Of course, not exhaustive. There are many other recommendations that can be made to reform the bank, but these are the ones that we think address most of the problems. And I'll pass it to Addy to talk about our specific calls to action.
Sorry, my notes are on my phone. Thanks so much, Bobby, for that. Summed up very briefly, our approach to this issue really is a public bank for the public interest. And what we have here is a kind of public, kind of bank in the private interest. So our recommendations are here for you to take. And you don't actually have to write them down, because we brought about 100 copies of this white paper that we'd be very happy for you to take back. So please, they're all over there. There's even more copies on the table over there. So just pick them up, take them with you. There are some great examples in the report about other public banks from around the world. Some of them are represented here, including the Nordic Investment Bank. Excuse me. I'll learn how to use a pen one day. The main thing that we want to point out in terms of our recommendations, of course, is that although the parliamentary committee that studied the bank called for the bank to be shut down, which of course was in itself historic and pretty much quoted verbatim from folks like Bobby and Dylan and Heather and others who had testified. Our position on this has been this is an opportunity for reform as well, especially since the government has in fact dug their heels and decided that they want to keep this going. So these are some of the recommendations we have that Tom has worked on with us. As part of this, we have been working very closely with the NDP to try and push for the review to actually happen. The act that established the bank was passed and was assented to, came into force on June 22nd, 2017. And there's a section in that act that specifically says that after 5 years upon the date of assent, there needs to be a review. Well, that just happened. That was June 22nd. We just passed just now. And so far we have no idea what's going on with this review. So very very clearly we have a very specific asks of everybody here. Actually, we want you to share that report that we put together. And actually, I should give a shout out to Nikki Ashton's office, who's here as well, who have a bill on the Canada Infrastructure Bank. So thanks for being here, Steve. We want you to all please to send a note to your representative, to the minister. If your organizations can send a letter to the minister and call for the review, just very simply remind them that they have to have a review, and maybe they'll turn around and say that committee hearing was the review, which we're afraid they might do. But just please let them know that they are obligated to hold that review, and that gives us an opportunity, all of us an opportunity, to have a seat at the table and continue this conversation with the folks making these decisions. And the final thing I just want to say is QP has been really, really obsessed with this bank for some time. We've been really following this very doggedly. We're really interested in making sure that whatever happens next happens in the public interest. We're a union, of course, that represents many workers in municipalities and in public services, but we're also a union that believes in social unionism, and we're at the forefront of a lot of public policy advocacy, and this is another one of the important areas that we really care deeply about. And so with that, I just want to leave you with these asks on the screen, and we really want to hear from you, because I'm sure you all have some great ideas for us and some suggestions and some thoughts, and there's international expertise in this room. So please tell us what you think we should be doing differently or better or not at all. We'd love to have Bobby answer all those questions. Thank you very much.